Oh, this is quite an interesting one. So, when we have to make a decision, we often use mental shortcuts. Think of it like using a rule of thumb. And these shortcuts are known as heuristics. And people rely on these mental shortcuts during uncertain times when they don't have enough information. And, for example, they might even stereotype. Let's say that somebody calls the police at 2 a.m. and reports that a Honda Civic with enhanced alloy wheels and pounding music was speeding through the streets with their windows open. Now, based on past complaints of the same nature, the police officer might assume that there is a strong likelihood that they're looking for a young man in his late teens or early 20s, probably wearing a baseball cap, a boy racer essentially. And yes, that's a stereotype. And so that's who the police will focus their search on, because representatively, that's who they're going to be looking for, and that's called representative heuristics. It's not always right, though. Now, different factors play a role when people use representative heuristics to make judgments. We make hundreds of decisions in a day, and we rely on heuristics because they help us preserve our mental resources and to make effective decisions in shorter periods of time. Can you imagine having to make conscious decisions for every single decision you had to make? Consciously turning on the kettle, consciously picking up a pen to write something. It would just be horrendous. So we use heuristics. So we make decisions by comparing objects or situations to past or similar situations. And the problem with representative heuristics is that we can also make errors by overestimating the similarities of different situations. So just because an object or an event is similar or representative, it doesn't necessarily mean that our past experience is what's happening again. And we can fall into stereotype very easily. Now, representative heuristics do have practical applications in real life. Of course they do. Doctors and psychiatrists use it all the time. And, they use it to decide that a diagnosis or a treatment plan is the best one based on how the patient's symptoms match existing cases of the same nature. But in many cases, these heuristics can lead to poor judgment, cognitive bias, and as I said before, stereotypes. When people overestimate similarities and ignore other relevant information, for example, informing social relationships, let's say, you're going out on a date or you're meeting new people, we might actually create inaccurate impressions by misjudging them based on a bad past experience, simply because that person might have a similar laugh or a similar way of speaking. We jump to conclusions. And representative heuristics are almost impossible to avoid, but you can minimize the effects when you're aware of what representative heuristics is and that you might actually be doing it. And this way you become, I suppose, more observant and better able to make accurate judgments based on the information and the facts in front of you, rather than your own assumptions and possible stereotypes. Mental shortcuts and rules of thumb, they do have their place, but not in every single decision-making process. So, representative heuristics and heuristics in general are hugely interesting and fascinating part of psychology, but try and use them properly rather than stereotyping.